welcome to Vigilant News, everybody, for the 8th of July, 2024. We've got an action-packed show for you, as usual. We're going to cover the Chevron case, the SCOTUS ruling that happened last week. Pretty seminal ruling that has a lot of very interesting things associated with it. Definitely one of these rulings, in my opinion, where the deep state, the cabal, used their power behind the scenes to manipulate the will of the people through a usurpation of power. So we'll get into that and why it was overturned. Biden says they can't, Biden stays, they can't get rid of him that easily, some initial reports suggest. Whitmer and Newsom don't want to run because they'll lose to Trump. The Trump sentencing was delayed by 2 months. President Trump follows Dr. Ben Carson on True Social as the VP rumors swirl. Feds on parade. The Patriot Front was marching through Nashville this past weekend, and was a really funny clip that the Gateway Pundit found that we'll have a great time looking at. We have the city banned crosses, but fought back and won on the 4th of July. So we'll get into the Idaho town, or city actually, that banned crosses. The people were not happy about that, and the city council member, the regional council head, actually overturned the ruling just beforehand. So that's a really piece of inspiring news here. And then I wrote a really, one of my, I think, most inspiring articles yet about like a letter to patriots about how much we've gone through, a little tour down memory lane, some things that I think the cabal has been doing for a long time and how close we are to getting things back on track. We also have a clip of Putin essentially endorsing Trump in an indirect way, but kind of hat-tipping the fact that Trump will likely be in a position, and Trump's ability to mitigate the Ukraine situation, he supports. This is Putin saying this. Gingrich says something, I don't know when this clip came out, but I shared it the other day on my socials, and it went pretty viral. And the Gingrich clip is him kind of like, without saying it, saying he knows as much as we do when it comes to the corruption of the banking cabal. So we'll get into that. And then we'll have a review of the Tennessee geoengineering ban that happened a few months ago now. Something I actually missed. I did not necessarily know that the geoengineering ban in Tennessee happened. Well, apparently there's a lot of other states that are considering doing this. And there's some interesting initial reports of some of the changes, how those have been received, and the effect that they've had on the skies in Tennessee. So welcome everybody to Vigilant News. I'm Justin, the host and founder of Vigilant News. Ryan will be joining us most likely next week. He unless something happened, he's going to be on a plane today. He might actually be on a plane right now, as a matter of fact, on his way back into our neck of the woods. He'll be here very briefly, and then he's got a commitment to honor. He pledged to help out his family, his friend, another member of his family, do something business-wise, and he's going to honor that commitment, which is another reason I like Ryan so much. He actually honors his word. So yeah, send your well wishes to Ryan. Hopefully everything went well over the past week since he was last sent a message to us here at the studio. And so I wanted to start off the show today, and before I do, let me just pop in and say hello. See, we've got Lulu, Debrich, excuse me, PJ. How's it going, everybody? Much love to y'all. If you don't normally do this, I suggest you do. It'd be really appreciated if you wouldn't mind sharing this video on your socials. That would be awesome. We're trying to get a good amount of followership, and we're doing the best we can with that. Thankfully, we've got a really dedicated, loyal following that we've had from before we were even on Badlands and other places. So that's nice to know. All right, so I want to share with you guys this clip of Putin. When I saw it, I definitely got a little excited. I think I put it in. Yeah, here it is. I thought I did. Hold on one second. So Putin is, in my opinion, he's very hip to a lot of different things. I think he knows quite a lot about what's going on. I think he knows a lot about the deep state. I didn't necessarily realize that. I just found out listening to Matt Arrett and Gordon Goes to Base Patrick Henry. I've been slowly going through the Breaking History series, which if you guys haven't checked it out, Breaking History is a fantastic show. It's really difficult to know and get a sense of like what is actual history, because history's been messed up so bad, like really bad. I don't know exactly to what extent our official history is messed up, but it's probably somewhere in the like half of everything we believe that happened in history might not be entirely accurate. Probably a lot more than that. There's some things that I'm still trying to vet as part of a group that I've been a part of for years. The man who I'm talking about, that he kind of wants to remain behind the scenes, so I won't mention his name, but he was telling me the other day, this was a month ago, that the true story of Patriots Day is that what actually happened is a whole bunch of patriots, about 10,000 of them, were rounded up, imprisoned in a coastal fort, and then as the tide was coming in, these patriots were somehow battened down on the beach and were forcibly drowned. And that was the cabal's kind of like FU to the Patriot movement way back when. And apparently there was somebody who's really notable in history who allegedly did this, according to him, and he says he has a like basically rock solid evidence to back this up, an actual record from the Parliament of the United Kingdom to back this up. I haven't seen it yet, so history's already messed up. They don't need people like me like accidentally spreading rumors, but I just want to show you just like the indication to which the history we know might not be true. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, I've recounted that story, and I'm about to tell you now, I don't know if that's true. But on the other side of the coin, how do we know anything is true? How do we know that anything that we've been told in our civics classes in first through, end of high school, in college, how do we know any of this stuff is true? Like, really? We have, from an epistemological perspective, meaning what is the basis, the foundation of the things we believe? That's what epistemology is. It's the science, as I like to say, of true knowledge or knowledge. It's also the philosophy of knowledge. So if somebody told you, like, a fact, like George Washington was the greatest patriot in United States history, how would you know? Like, would you know because it said it in a textbook? Well, how do you know if that textbook is correct? Is it because there were letters exchanged between people who purportedly lived at the time of George Washington's time on this world, back in this late, 18th century, early 19th century? And these letters talked about all the amazing things he did. Well, if that's the basis of that claim, then how do we know those letters are true? So I'm not saying that, just because we don't have a lot of evidence to suggest that a piece of history we believe is actually true is true, or that it might be false, like the one I just mentioned, or Abraham Lincoln, for example. Like, we think he freed the slaves, he did all these great things, but how do we really know this? And I think it's a fair question to ask. And I also think if we want to be honest about what we think is true and what isn't true, then we have to at the very least consider the possibility that something might not be true. And this is why the clip I'm about to show you here with Putin, I think, is so, telling. But even there, it's like, well, how do we know that the clip from Putin here is actually true? It could be a deep fake. It could be all sorts of things. So, like I said, I think they call it in epistemology, epistemological virtue. And what that basically means is acknowledging uncertainty. Like, let's just acknowledge that we don't necessarily know what we think is true is actually true. And then let's use what I call an an omniological method, or Gordon had reminded me on the show that you could also think about this as bicameral thinking, which is something that Burning Bright talks about on Badlands. So it's the idea that if you hear a fact or you hear a piece of information, you consider all the possibilities as to whether that's true or false or not, and you explore each one, honestly. And that, I think, is probably the best way to get down to the closest thing we can to the truth itself. Because, as I said, we don't really know if the history we've been told is true. I mean, look at how much they've been lying to us about the past 8 years. Look at how much lying has happened with respect to Trump. And ask yourself, did they do something like that in the past? And, this is another thing I'll mention I'm kind of off to a ranty start today, but let's go for it. During the, during a person's lifetime, there's a lot of things there, the information that's thrown at them. How do we know if anything's true? For example, I've heard recently that the Falun Gong spiritual movement in China, might have actually been a CIA op. And the reason these people were imprisoned in these internment camps in China is not for their religious beliefs. That's actually a Con Inc. narrative. It's actually because the whole movement, in some measure, is a CIA operation designed to destabilize China. And if that's true, and some of the other things I've been hearing about China is true, which is that this whole Belt and Road Initiative is not necessarily because they're trying to conquer the world. It's because infrastructure is important to any civilization. And the intelligence apparatus in the United States and Europe, so the globalists, back in the 50s and 60s at some point, I think they went public with what I'm about to say in the 70s, in the early 70s, decided they were going to stop building infrastructure. You know, they were going to basically compartmentalize infrastructure so that a country like Guatemala or El Salvador had barely any infrastructure. They had no ability to pull the oil out of the ground. They had no ability to ship goods. They couldn't really do much of anything but that one little thing that they were given charge of by the globalists. And so when you, at the globalist level, because they're often pirate merchants, you know, if you're a merchant class, then you can control the flow between these prison colonies that we call countries and then exert an incredible amount of power over the world. So how do we really know any of this is true? That's the big question. I'm not sure. I like to consider all possibilities, and I'm sure you guys do too. Lulu says, Alpha's guest Mike, who has been on his recent shows, blowing me away with RE history. Oh, really? I have to check that out. Is that on, I forget the name of that show. SitRep, I think it is. Let me know if it is, because I'm always looking for something to chew through. I've gone through, I think I'm on episode like 35 of Breaking History, and I started it like a month and a half ago. So I kind of like, when I'm out and about and I'm like doing yard work or laundry or stuff, I usually have my phone in my pocket. Although that might not be a good idea necessarily. I call it my portable radiation device for a reason. But I listen to stuff like that all the time. So, Deb Rich says, hey all, Joe's having what they call a big boy press conference on Friday. Can't wait. Yeah, me too. I have some interesting things to talk about with Joe Biden. Before I rant away the entire show, let me get to one I wanted to share with you about Putin, because we got a lot to talk about today. I'm probably going to have to kind of breeze through some of the articles. There's a bunch. I'd love to just sit here and dig into every little detail with you guys. But it's only so much time. As a matter of fact, I almost forgot to mention, I'm going to be on the Dauntless Dialogue live stream after the show. So if you're familiar, go to Dauntless Dialogue. I believe they posted it on their Telegram and their True Social. I believe they also have a Twitter account. I know because he talked to me about it before the show started here about an hour or so ago and asked if I wanted to come on. So I'm going to really enjoy going on there. Adam Riva is an incredible filmmaker. He did the Devolved series that I'm sure you guys have seen. He also did Global Coup d'etat. I think he's working on several other awesome projects right now for various people connected to some of the groups that we work with here and we know. So yeah, I'll be on that. You can go to the Dauntless Dialogue Rumble to check that out if you got time. All right, so let's go ahead and play this clip of Putin.
Well, you know, the fact that Mr. Trump, as a presidential candidate, says that he's ready and wants to stop the war in Ukraine, we take that very seriously. Well, I haven't seen his ideas on how exactly he's going to do that, and that is the key question. But I have no doubt that he says that sincerely, and we support that. Well, you know, the fact.
So there you go. So I think Trump, or yes, Trump, but Putin, I think is definitely pretty hip to a lot of stuff. There's a man that we've talked about many times on the show, Ryan and I, Martin Armstrong. He's developed one of the most sophisticated and well-regarded AI market trend devices, prediction tools. He's known as the most accurate economic forecaster in history. So much so that he was actually imprisoned for 11 years because he refused to give the DoD access to his source code for his AI prediction device. And he was apparently not only predicting market trends, but he was predicting all these other things like false flag attacks that wasn't supposed to happen. Now, part of the reason why I think that's interesting is because it suggests that the market is rigged. Like if you're a massive criminal syndicate that got a hold of the global financial system back in the 1930s, And you have been rigging markets ever since, and you have a long history of rigging markets because let's face it, one of the ways that the Rothschild got their wealth and power, which they admit themselves, is that they effectively engaged in securities fraud by spreading false rumors of, I believe it was Napoleon's downfall, causing a whole bunch of people to want to buy shares. I might have the details on this a little bit off, so forgive me if that's the case. But effectively, they got people to, during that era of Napoleon era, got a whole bunch of, I believe it was British, in the market to buy a bunch of shares that then they had actually lost. Napoleon lost, as a matter of fact. And so these shares became worth nothing. Actually, it was the other way around. But in any case, they engaged in a bunch of market fraud, and they've been doing it for a long time. So if you as a market analyst has developed a tool that allows you to predict market trends, and you're actually starting to call some of the economic shenanigans that the criminal elite has been using to basically defraud the world for a very long time, including the elite, by the way, then you as the elite, through your intelligence apparatus, which is basically created from the ground up by criminals. There was an seedy alliance between what we call the mafia, the Jewish mafia, and the Italian mafia back in the 20s and 30s that Operation, what's the book called? One Government Under Blackmail talks about, Whitney Webb. And basically, the intelligence apparatus as we know it, the CIA, the thing that gave birth to the CIA and almost every other three-letter agency, was a part of a product of a mob-connected outfit. And the government worked with the mob openly, and that didn't disappear after World War II, which was apparently the excuse at the time. And yeah, so the point is that the financial sector, our financial system, is, from the beginning, its origin, I would say, was designed wholesale to defraud the people of the world. Now, another very interesting thing that this guy told me about yesterday is that there's the corruption of the law system. It's kind of like the precursor to all this. Like, a lot of the things that get attention is like the Federal Reserve that started up in 1913, Creature from Jekyll Island. There's that book that came out that talks about the story, but way before that, in the early 1800s, like 1820, 1830, and even before that, but certainly the 1800s had a lot. In the 19th century, there was a lot of stuff going on. And the British, through their control of admiralty law, decided to basically classify human beings as ships, as vessels. And if a captain does not have, or excuse me, if a ship does not have a captain that is competent, that knows how to captain properly, then that ship can, under admiralty law, be essentially taken over and confiscated as a prize of war, as a prize of the high seas. And so they developed this entire elaborate slavery system based on the idea that we're actually ships, that the soul is actually this piece of spiritual cargo that's been left on the beach, so to speak, or left floating in the ocean. And the Holy See, through previously drafted things like the Papal Bulls, like Unum Sanctum, which declared that all souls must be salvaged and in order to do so, or must be saved, and in order to do so, they must be subjected to the authority of the Roman Pontiff. That was in 1302. Okay, so these things, it took them like 500 years to really get the system perfected. You know, common law, I'm sure you guys have heard of common law before. Common law, and a lot of people think common law is like so much better than our current system, and in a lot of ways it is. At least it acknowledged some basic things like fundamental rights of people. The common law system, the Commonwealth system, was up and running at full steam by the time, in full operation by the time the colonies were founded way back in the 16th century, and certainly in the 17th and 18th century. But that system itself was also predicated on this idea that there's a law for commoners, there's a law for the people who are spiritually effectively dead or insane or lunatics, who do not have the wisdom to govern their own souls, and as a result are a liability for the rest of us. And as a result, we need basically the babysitter that is the Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church, and the Roman Curia, which is a legal system they developed. And then later in Britain, the admiralty law system and the maritime law system, which then got another reboot in 1933. So right when all of these birth certificates and the Federal Reserve was already up and running for 20 years and all these different things, they created a system that was effectively designed to create a massive global plantation state where basically every single country was itself a kind of slave plantation where the ships or the people or the citizenship, what's that all about? Well, the citizenship is the legal person that these crazy British bankers, the British intelligence is tied to this in some respect, but that's like another arm of this. It's almost like much deeper below the surface at the roots of this criminal syndicate enterprise, the pirate enterprise. You have the ecclesiastical law, so the law system that justifies through religious arguments, well, we have to save these souls. When you ever wonder why they put silver drops on babies' eyes, it's because at a deep level of occult law, the ecclesiastical law, they actually believe that it's a part of a soul salvaging ritual. You have to put money, silver coins on the dead who are going to cross over from the living world to the underworld through the river Styx, and that's for the ferryman, right? Well, again, at a deep level, they believe this, and so they believe by putting these silver drops on a soul or on a newborn child that they can salvage the soul, because they also presume and argue that all souls are cast adrift because there's no actual competency at various places in the world. So again, you hear this stuff and you're like, man, this sounds like total nonsense. Like, how could anybody be stupid enough to believe this? And yet when you read some of these statutes of Westminster and papal bulls and other things, by the way, there's a book called Ecclesiastical Law that we're releasing here in as part of the UKD group here, probably in the next couple weeks. And it gets into this with some of the things I've just been mentioning. And it's pretty remarkable because literally, according to what we have been able to research and basically prove unequivocally, this is actually the way the hidden system works. So I'm sure you guys have heard the birth certificate, strawman trust. So this idea that your birth certificate has a trust account associated with it, which it does. They estimate the value of every human being somewhere in the 180 million to, it goes up from there. Somewhere around there is the average, 180 million. And so every time you engage with the system in some way and use the financial system, a bill that is associated to your legal person through the Social Security number actually is also accessing the estate that is your birth certificate. And they can, in some way, access these funds that are held in your bond trust account. So yeah, it's really crazy stuff. I probably went on way too long of a tangent, but I just want to let you know that like these systems, these cabal members, they're being exposed in a huge way right now. That's what the Q operation was all about. That's what I think we've been seeing over the past 4 years with Biden being in office and all of the shenanigans that's been happening with that. So let's go ahead and let's switch over to I see Artsy Joan. Hey, how's it going, Artsy Joan? Good to see you. Really good to see you. Yeah, we're getting old band back together, right? All right, so let me find. Let's do this one first. I'm going to go through the SCOTUS case. The SCOTUS case is really interesting. I'm not going to have a chance to go through every detail, but it's really fascinating. So I'm going to try to zip through as much as I possibly can of this. The Supreme Court is considering two jointly cases, Lopper Bright Enterprises versus Remindo and Relentless Inc. versus Department of Commerce, that could affect the impact of federal regulations in implementing laws passed by Congress. Although these cases are focused on regulations pertaining to the fishing industry, the court decision could have significant implications for numerous other policies, including for regulations related to patent and consumer protections in healthcare. The brief discusses the long-standing legal doctrine being challenged called Chevron deference, and includes examples of what could be at stake for healthcare and healthcare consumers should federal courts no longer use this doctrine to address litigation related to federal health regulations. The focus here is on patent and customer protection regulations, but overturning the Chevron deference would have implications on all areas. Let me just make sure I'm reading the right one here. Actually, I'm going to switch to this one because I think this one's a little bit more summarized as far as what happened. So in a landmark, so that was the cases that happened. These cases, I believe they announced that they were going to go through these cases back in, actually I think it might be written down that other article here. Yeah, back in April. And the Supreme Court just made the decision basically in late June. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court has overturned the long-standing Chevron doctrine, fundamentally altering the balance of power between the judiciary and the federal agencies. The ruling, which came in the case of Lauper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce et al., remarks a significant shift in the balance of power between the branches of government. The Chevron doctrine, established in the 1984 case of Chevron USA Inc. versus Natural Resources Defense Council, has long been a source of contention. It granted deference to federal agencies, meaning they deferred to, they said, we're not going to make the decision, we're going to let them make the decision, which in this case, as we'll show here, basically gives them the power to make policy as if they were the federal government. And as I'm sure you guys know, I don't have to tell you, the only reason the government has any authority at all is because we, the people, gave it that authority. So the federal government is an instrument of the people. Our rights are the most important thing. And although you never almost ever hear of it described this way, I would describe it as a fiduciary relationship. When you're a fiduciary, which is more of a trust law concept, which is a critical thing to understand, if you want, like, as far as I'm concerned, if I was to reform the education system tomorrow, one of the most important concepts I would make as a seminal aspect of our education system was the importance of studying law, of course, but also contract law and trust law. Because when you actually know the relationship of a trustee to the grantor, which means the people that we create, the organizations we create and that we hire to protect and defend our rights, then you know that what the shenanigans that's been happening in government for a very long time has never been lawful, and arguably it's all fraud. And as far as I'm concerned, it at the very least needs to get reviewed, if not totally overturned, and we just rebuild the entire United States legal system since, frankly, I don't know when it ever worked properly, but at least since 1871, when after the Civil War, when a lot of this stuff really got ramped up, and they effectively created a federalized, corporatized United States, which I know you guys are also familiar with. So anyway, let me try to reserve the rants, or I'm going to just blow through this whole segment here. It granted deference to federal agencies in interpreting ambiguous statutes, effectively allowing unelected bureaucrats to make laws through the regulatory action. However, by a 6-3 majority, the SCOTUS has now declared that such power is unconstitutional and goes against the principles of democratic governance. Quote, Chevron is overruled, Chief Justice Roberts wrote in his majority opinion. Courts must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority. Chief Justice Roberts emphasized that the role of interpreting laws and making policy decisions should rest with elected representatives in Congress, not with unaccountable agency officials. The ruling has been hailed by critics of regulatory overreach as a victory for the separation of powers and the rule of law. Okay, so I think it's here where they're explaining this, so I'm going to read this a little more, and then if it doesn't, I'll jump in, fill in the gaps as to what do they mean, deference. This is critical. Yeah, I'll read this and then we'll go on. So Chevron, Roberts explains, quote, defines the command of the Administration Procedure Act, the law of governing federal administrative agencies, that the reviewing court, not the agency whose action it reviews, is to decide all relevant questions of law and interpret statutory provisions. It requires a court to ignore, not follow, the reading of the court, the court would have reached had it exercised its independent judgment as required by the APA. Chevron's presumption that statutory ambiguities are implicit delegations of authority by Congress to federal agencies is misguided, Roberts explains, because agencies have no special competence in resolving statutory ambiguities. Courts do. Okay, so there's a lot of technical language there to digest. So basically what it means is this. So if we the people, we elect our representatives. So our will is the most important. First of all, right away, our representatives should ideally not be doing anything unless we directed them to do it. Now, because of very obvious reasons, the people aren't necessarily hip to actually run a country properly. So there is a kind of expertise that has to go into it. For example, you might hire a contractor to come and, rebuild your deck, and you might tell him you want a deck that looks like the Taj Mahal, and he's going to be like, well, listen, lady, I get it. You want like this Taj Mahal, but it ain't going to happen. Me as the expert who knows how to actually build these things, I'm going to tell you what I think you can reasonably have, and then you can make the decision. And if you've hired a good contractor, he's actually going to, as much as possible, and this is true for any trustee, because that's what a contractor is. He's in the role of trustee. You who have the rights, you who have the property, are bringing in an outside person to execute your will and your desire. And you give them your rights on loan. It's called conveyance, that allows them to do work on your house. And that's, if somebody's coming over and to help you build your deck, that's a perfect example of that. Well, in the legislature, the representatives are effectively trustees. They are contractors. They're supposed to do our will. And when there's any uncertainty as to what do we actually want, they should be coming to talk to us. Now, there's a double duty here. They have the duty to actually come to us and talk to us in the right way so that we can be fully versed as to what the decisions are and what happens. So we might say, hey, Representative John Doe, I want you to go up to Congress and make sure that, this thing that we have a public resolution about can happen. Like, I don't know, we want to make sure every kid at school gets a free quart of milk every day, something like that. And he might go there and be like, well, this is what the will of the people want. They talk about what the impact would be on all these other people. Who's going to actually fulfill these orders? Where is this milk going to come from? Is it going to be healthy? Who's going to do the testing? Who's going to do distribution? All these different factors that are going to go into making that collective people's will thing a reality. And if we even have the right to impose that on dairy farmers at all, but that's a nuanced question in this example I'm giving you here. So then they would come back to us and be like, hey, listen, this is the information I got. What do you guys actually want to do? This you wanted this, but this is the reality of what we got to work with. So based on these refined choices, what do you actually want to do? That's, I think, what a true representative should do. They should always be deferring to the people, and they should stay in communication. Well, there's various challenges to doing that all the time. There's practical challenges. It takes a long time and an effort to get a whole district for a representative to actually show up at the right place and time to actually make their will known. So there's a certain level of delegated power and implicit authority. That's what implicit authority means, is like, you might not tell your representative that you're going to give them unilateral authority to decide what kind of milk to provide, but you are giving him broad authority to do that. And that implicit broad authority, meaning that you're not going to specify what type of milk he's going to be able to get, but you are telling him he needs to make a decision, and that is implied, hence implicit, in your delegation of your rights as a citizen to this representative. Well, the way the Constitution works and our government works is that we create these agencies. So Congress, who represents our rights, has this mandate from the people to say, hey, we got to defend our borders, so we're going to create an agency for that. That's what ICE is. We're going to defend all sorts of things. We're going to protect the environment. That's what the EPA is about, although it's debatable if the EPA was ever actually designed to protect the environment at all, but that's another story. We've got the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's another agency that was created to act as a kind of inside the United States intelligence apparatus that works with law enforcement and various things like this, right? So we got all this stuff that needs to happen. And just to make sure things actually happen properly, you got to, as a citizenry, we kind of got to hire the right people and trust that they're going to do the right thing. And then those trustees, those representatives, they're going to create agencies, and then they have to delegate power and authority to those agencies for them to also do various things. And that's what implicit agency authority means. So when so with this decision, what they have also a provision where the courts, when there's an ambiguity, so when the agency is like, hey, man, we got to decide, they need to specify whether or not, immigrants that are coming over the border are going to get a pair of shoes or not. What are we going to do? Well, if it doesn't say in the legal statute itself that gave that three-letter agency the authority to hand out shoes to illegal immigrants when they come over, if it doesn't spell it out explicitly, meaning it's literally inside the bill and, the wording, then that is an ambiguity that they don't know. That just says we got to give them shoes. They don't say what kind of shoes. Are we talking sneakers here? Are we talking flip-flops? Are we talking, pumps? What are we talking about? So that ambiguity would normally be something that the court system would deal with. The court would look at the law, the legislation, and say, all right, well, let's see. What are we trying to do here? They zoom out to look at all the broader context of everything that's trying to happen inside the country, not just with this law, but like ideally everything if the court system's actually doing its job, right? And they would decide and then tell the three-letter agency, all right, well, the law said we're going to give them shoes with soles, and that means we're going to give them shoes with soles, but we're not going to give them, shoes with the little, wheel in it that kids like run around and potentially, break their neck with. So that's what the provision used to be. That's what the rule or the governing practice used to be, is the courts would decide that. But the Chevron deference deferred that, or gave the three-letter agency the power to create its own rule and say, all right, well, henceforth, now that we have this ambiguity, we're going to create our own set of rules to decide whether or not these immigrants are going to have rollerblades or pumps or flip-flops or whatever it is. And then once that decision is made at the three-letter agency level, now it's effectively equivalent to the law itself. So if there's another three-letter agency or another situation where there's the actual law that's created by the legislature, and they're trying to figure out a situation associated with that law, well, now that agency's decision would basically be imposed on that situation as if it had come from the legislature. So that's what the Chevron deference was all about. Now, I would say this whole situation can be highly manipulated. I mean, just think about it. First of all, we can't trust our representatives. So often they're idiots. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Two, they're corrupt. They're not interested in representing the people. They're interested in representing the globalists or their lobbyists or, whatever, anybody else but us. Even if they are interested in representing us, they're not necessarily able to do their job properly. And most of the time, they are making the laws that are actually passed in the legislature are not coming from the representatives. It's not like they're going to the people and being like, hey, let's all sit down and sing Kumbaya and make a law that we're going to use to govern a certain situation in our country. They hire experts and NGOs and, lobbying groups and things like this. And a lot of times, the very industries that are being regulated are the ones who are drafting these laws. Like, look at the FDA, look at like a ton of the whole aspects of our society are the people that are literally being regulated, writing the rules that then get passed through Congress. I mean, that happens everywhere. So that's what's really going down in our country right now. So what do you think they're doing? Well, if it's not couth, for example, if it's hard to, I'm going to try to switch examples here. Let's say that the legislature, just like we had with the recent Supreme Court decision with abortion, now it's kicked back to the states, right? So it used to be that it was a federal legal policy to allow abortion, which not really was, but that's another story. I don't think, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the SCOTUS or the Supreme Court of the United States can make law with a decision, which is basically what we've been dealing with Roe v. Wade. But that's another story. But let's say that the Roe v. Wade was overturned, so now we have this hole in our legal policy. What are we going to do about abortion? Well, it kicked it to the states, which means the states have to decide, well, what are we going to do about this abortion situation? Well, if you're a state that is maybe a little dicey, like it's Virginia or even here in Georgia where I live, and you're like, well, the globalists, they want abortion to go through for various reasons. They want to harvest that genetic material. They want to do effectively satanic, child sacrifice rituals where women are, I won't get too deep into it, but you get what I'm saying. So if they are interested in that, but at the local state level, it's hard for the representatives to sell the idea of abortion to the people because they've got to get elected, and you as the cabal need to control that. Well, then you'll make sure that the law about what happens with aborted tissue is ambiguous. So in the letter of the law itself, it's like you don't actually specify what happens with aborted fetal tissue. That gets passed. Frankly, nobody really looks anyway. So like most of the time, people don't even know what the heck is going on in their state legislature. But let's just say for the moment that they did. Then now, because it's ambiguous, the people we elected in the local level to deal with the abortion issue in Georgia, for example, well, they can go to us as the voters and be like, oh, look, we got this legislation passed where it says we're not going to have abortion unless extenuating circumstance. And that you might think, oh, well, it says no abortion unless an extenuating circumstance. So what does that extenuating circumstance mean? Well, it's an ambiguity. And now the three-letter agency that regulates abortions can come in and be like, well, it says we're not going to allow abortions unless it's an extenuating circumstance, like, I don't know, there's a woman who wants to seek an abortion. And now we've got basically what's effectively an abortion situation being legalized in the state, even though the legislature says one thing. But the three-letter agency, using that ambiguity, decided to do another. Now, I'm using a totally hypothetical example. So what I just described is not actually happening to my knowledge, but the principle is at work. And I wanted to, create a hyperbolic example so you guys could kind of see like how easily this situation can be corrupted. And that's basically what the Chevron decision allowed. So now the courts have to actually do that job of interpreting the law instead of the three-letter agencies. Now, what I want to know is, are we going to go back over the past 35 years since the Chevron deference was in place? And are we going to carefully examine all of the regulative policy in a state or a county or a city, that these three-letter agencies have used to decide what's actually going to happen? Because unlike what you might think, when the legislature passes an act, that act actually just kind of acts as like a little seed, and then there's regulators that got to come in and actually create the actual rules that will get followed in a certain area. So there's all sorts of shenanigans, as far as I can tell, that could potentially be at work as a result of this Chevron decision that had been happening for a long time. So anyway, so I think personally, in closing, it's a really good thing. I think it's good that we started to push back on these three-letter agencies. Do I think it's the end of it? Like, oh, we can just sit back and put our feet up and, the fight to protect freedom's over? Absolutely not. Who knows if the courts are going to do a good job? Who knows if our representatives are going to do a good job? And ultimately, do we have an educated population that actually knows how to wield its power? Because that's one of the things we had an interview about that was released yesterday with Sheriff Richard Mack, is that the people actually have a tremendous, huge amount of power to stop a ton of shenanigans pushed by the globalists through the office of the sheriff. But it only works if you invoke the rights. That's the crazy thing about law, is that a right not invoked has no power. You could literally have the right not to get robbed, but if you let somebody rob you under civil asset forfeiture, or the city decides we're going to use eminent domain to take half your backyard, or whatever the situation is, there might be a right where you can actually push back against that. But if you don't know, if you haven't done your research, if you haven't worked with people in your community to create this trust, this community, like, be our brother's keeper thing that I love talking about, then you will get trampled. And that's kind of what they're counting on. So there's a lot of work, I would argue, to do. All right, so let me look at some of the comments here. Artsy says Chevron is a huge deal. I couldn't agree. She also says, we the people via our elected officials should have our laws implemented, not cancel some big money business. Yep. If only those elected are true and good, which is not happening so much these days. Exactly. Lulu says people have to realize it's good versus evil. That's right. I mean, that's the thing too, is, evil flourishes in ignorance. Like, it's very, what is the old phrase? Like, it's something like evil flourishes when good people do nothing, I believe. That's exactly it. You think, I mean, you guys know this. Like, why is it that our children and our friends and our fellow neighbors and citizens, they spend more time, messing around with this thing and watching, like, Dancing with the Stars, as I like to say, which is like a euphemism for wasting their precious life energy, instead of studying what's going on in our country and like what their rights are and how to use those rights properly. If I haven't, if you haven't seen the Sheriff Mack interview from yesterday, please watch it. We're probably going to have him on again. I mean, frankly, if it was up to me, he'd be on like every month, because he's his whole story. He's a guy who literally won a Supreme Court case as a result of using the situation, which admittedly, I don't remember all the details, but basically it was something like the sheriff, the federal agencies were trying to usurp power or take power from the sheriffs, and constitutionally, the sheriff is literally the highest authority in the land when it comes to the citizenry. So it's not the president, it's not the U.S. government, it's not your judges, it's not the police, it's the sheriff. The sheriff is the one who has the power via the Constitution to decide what laws are actually enforced and what laws are not, what regulations are enforced. So when the FBI comes in and says, you know what, there's somebody in your town, sheriff, in one of your towns in the county you represent that's drinking too much raw milk, we're going to come in and we're going to shut that person down and we're going to put him in jail. The sheriff can be like, no, you're not. Because that's an unjust law, and you have to, you got to do homework, and the citizenry have to support the sheriff. That's another thing, is that if we don't know about anything, then we can't use the office of the sheriff. If we got a bogus sheriff in there that doesn't know what the hell he's doing, then we can't actually, use that power properly. So this is why I will never stop beating this drum that we, the people, have to get educated about the law, and that's also why, I continually plug you the Ucadia books, because I'm literally working with a group that is going to be releasing 22 different books. As a matter of fact, it's time for my weekly pull-up on the Ucadia material. Let me pull up this Vigilant news. I think I put them in. What happened here? Hold on 1 second. There it is. All right, so I'm going to pull up the Ucadia books. So if you want to know what there they are. So I'm actually share the screen. Here we go. So in this, so this is the Sheriff Mack interview from the other day.
Watch what protein shakes do to your body.
This is a protein drink. You've got almond butter. Almonds have a pH.
Watch what protein shakes
sorry
do
about
to your
that,
body.
guys. Forgot that. I'm not signed in over
You've
here.
got almond butter.
All right, be quiet. So down here, if you scroll down, it says, here we go, Maxims of Law, Ucadia books. These books are filled with incredibly powerful knowledge. Like, as far as I'm concerned, this should be required reading so that we can actually know how to defend our rights properly. In this one, Divine Law, it talks about some of the most fundamental concepts of law. And this one here, it talks about human laws. That's what positive law actually is. Let me make sure I'm showing you this. Okay. This is sovereign law. So this one's really cool. Like, what is a sovereign? Why does a country have any type of rights over their people anyway? What is a sovereign supposed to be doing? How do you know this? Is there a history here? So can we see a history of all the bogus law concepts that have been used throughout history, and what are the right ones? Well, these books help explain that. Now, it's not easy to read material, I can tell you that. It's kind of dry and boring, but if you just read a little bit of it every day, man, I'm telling you. So really good stuff here. Definitely check it out. I'll pop this interview in the description so you guys can check it out. And I'll get off my my law horse for a bit. So let me continue going through some of these comments. If there's any ambiguity. RT Jones says, ambiguity is the criminal syndicate's favorite word. That's exactly right. Let's see. CSUS says, I'm hoping Chevron has precedent over CARB. I can't stand the regulations on automotive in California. CARB. Oh, I don't know what CARB is. Is that the legislation in California? All right, so let me continue on here. Where is... I forgot to pull out the chat. There we go. So I'm going to pop that. That's the Sheriff Mack interview. Whoops. Oh, well, it's okay. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'll also put it as a comment in the video. So if anybody's watching this after the fact, they can have access to the Sheriff Mack interview. So if you're watching and you're like, man, where are all those amazing books that Justin was talking about? Well, you can go down to the comments, look for the Sheriff Mack interview, a long forgotten tool for freedom. And you can click on that, go to the links in the description, and the books of law are right there. All right. All right, so let's talk about Ascent Nutrition. So, guys, Ascent Nutrition has a lot of great, amazing products. They've actually been Vigilant News sponsor for a long time. I've known Ascent, I've known Lance for years. It's coming up on 10 years. So, if you use the promo code FREEDOM, There's actually a 4th of July sale that's happening right now. I believe it's over, but because I know, them, and they really care about selling these products, they'll let you they'll honor the code if you use it. So go and use the code FREEDOM, promo code FREEDOM. You're going to get 20% off. It works, I believe, for the spruce soap. So the soap is really pure, a really good quality soap. My wife loves this soap for her hair, especially. I didn't know that, women would even like Bard soap for hair, but apparently they do. And she says it's literally one of the best soaps she's ever used in her life. And I think this is it right here. This is actually her review. So there you go, guys. That's her review. Also, another thing I want to promote, humic and fulvic acid. Humic and fulvic acid helps remove heavy metals, radiation, for those of you who are worried about the Fukushima situation and other radiation that's flying around us. You know that there's a bunch. It also helps remove heavy metals, I believe I said. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but there's so many heavy metals. All of these dyes that you hear about, like red 40, yellow 5, all this kind of stuff. You know what's the center of those, or you know what the core molecule in those dyes are? They're heavy metals. So cadmium, strontium, various ones. I can't remember all of them right now, but they're heavy metals, and this stuff can actually help remove it. As well as tattoos. If you've gotten tattoos, the ink in tattoos is made with heavy metals. It's horrific. We've been poisoned for so long, so definitely check that out. Organic coffee. There's not much coffee that isn't truly mold-free and pesticide-free. Well, we actually provide the test results, and I've mentioned it before. I'm going to actually show you guys. So this is a test result right here. So what does this say? Where is it? So these are all the different toxins. This is the parts per million, parts per billion. And this is the reporting limits. So there's basically very little. They're so low that it's just at threshold is what you're looking at here. Now, I've actually suggested Lance do an article on this because it's not necessarily easy to read these things. But basically what it's talking about is if you were to do a certificate analysis for your average cup of coffee, let's say at Starbucks or something like that, which is a project I have. I have a project. If any millionaires watching, they want to donate money to me so I can make this project a reality. I have a dream. I have a dream of creating a nonprofit that tests products for known toxins. We have a private lab that we use to test the products that we all are using in the United States and globally, and issues reports on what was found in those products. And you guys would be shocked at how many toxins are in a lot of our products. I've got more info on coming on that hopefully soon when I can get some more time to finish that project. So anyway, I'll just focus on one last one. Pine needle extract is back. So pine needle extract, it literally helps melt or destroy spike protein. So we got a lot of spike proteins. We got a lot of vaccinated people that are running around spreading spike protein like it's Christmas. So you definitely want to grab yourself some of that. And then I'll also mention algae oil. So if you guys take fish oil, the reason fish oil is good is because they eat algae. And now this is something that's really interesting. Most fish oil, when it's in a capsule, those little capsules that you take, apparently most of it gets destroyed in your gut because it's supposed to be absorbed through your esophagus. A lot of nutrients, enzymes, fats, omegas, minerals, all sorts of things are better absorbed through your esophagus through the mastication process when you actually chew. But if you put it in a pill, then it bypasses that whole part of your body and then it goes into your gut. And you know what happens? It just gets nuked and you just get expensive, bathroom products, to put it that way. So we use what's called a liposomal method. So it's in a dropper and you put it in your mouth. You don't have to hold it in your tongue or something. You just swallow it and it'll work its magic. And it works really well. I've been using it for a while and I actually feel the difference in my mind when I use these things. And then last one, I'm on a roll here. So lion's mane mushroom. This stuff has been proven to help reverse Alzheimer's in some studies. It grows new brain cells and new synapses, excuse me. And I feel it. Like I take it every day with my coffee, and man, let me tell you, like within about an hour, it's like my brain is like, whoop, come right on. As a matter of fact, I waited half my day today by accident. I made it, and then I kind of like left it on the counter. I forgot about it. And then I took it, and then so this is after the initial buzz. You might be like, oh well, Justin, you're just talking about that initial buzz you get from drinking your coffee. I'm like, no. That I drank my coffee, And then 3 hours later, I had this stuff, and bam, I started feeling pretty good. So check out Ascent Nutrition. Go ascentnutrition.com. Use the link in the description of this video, and make sure to use promo code FREEDOM. Promo code FREEDOM. You get 20% off, and you also get 10% off of your order when you subscribe, as well as free shipping. So definitely check that out. All right, let's see here. I think I got a couple more comments. The Ninth Plague. Thanks for that, Justin. Links in the comments. Bot. Just chat for viewers is very helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Try to always make sure the links are in there. Hey, Artsy, really awesome to see you. Y'all have a wonderful day. Everybody else stick around. Show ain't over yet. All right, so I'm going to try to breeze through some of these other ones. As a matter of fact, hold on, speaking of coffee. All right. So Biden stays. Dems can't get rid of him that easily, reports suggest. So unfortunately, after the debate the other night, or a couple weeks ago, you think to yourself, oh man, Biden's done. They're going to get rid of him so quick. Well, turns out it's not as hard, or it's not as easy as you might think. So as usual, make sure you go to vigilant.news, on vigilant.news. In the show notes for today, you'll find the links to the articles I'm looking at right now. Let's take a look at this man here. What's his name? It took me a while to find this guy's name. I don't think I actually found his name. I looked for like an hour. But anyway, this is a video from yesterday, so let's take a look.
Something that has not been talked about, the mechanics of replacing him.
Oh, yeah.
The piece that hasn't been talked about is Republicans will sue in virtually every state that matters. Not all 50 states, but they're going to sue the moment Democrats try to make this move to block access to the ballot of whoever.
Like a debate and switch or something?
Well, ballot access rules are state controlled.
Okay.
So they will choose about 20 states that really matter, and they will tie this up in the courts and go all the way to the Supreme Court before November to say you cannot replace Joe Biden on the ballot. They won't win many of them, but if they win a couple critical states, that matters to the presidency. So I'm not a Democrat, as I said last week. If you're going to replace Joe Biden because of the polls, there's a lot of work that's got to get done. Something that has not been talked about, the mechanics.
So he's talking about Heritage Foundation, and I put that in this article. So they're not going to be able to replace Joe Biden as easily as you might think. The other issue is that everybody else is polling actually worse than Joe Biden, which is, man, I mean, talk about like, I almost said something very un-PC. Let's just say that it would not be, it's not exactly a reward or an award you want to show off to everybody. It's not a hallmark of your status as a politician. So the Heritage Foundation, they're doing a case on that. I think I have another article about that, but I put a bunch in this article you're looking at right now. Let's take a look at this man, who is Greg Swenson, a frequent media commentator on markets, economics, and politics.
I think the ideal scenario is Biden stays as the candidate, but Kamala's not much different. She was polling below Biden, which is really difficult to do. Biden's got the lowest approval ratings, surely since Jimmy Carter, but maybe of anyone post-war. So, that I would say from a purely tactical view, the Republicans want Biden on the ticket. Kamala, same thing. It's someone else that could throw a wrench into it. It would create a lot of chaos in the Democrat Party, but there's some unknowns there at least. Whereas if it's Biden or Kamala Harris, Trump will win. I think that's pretty safe to say at this point.
And what about if we just throw out some other names? And again, none of this has happened. We heard from President Joe Biden that I think he said only God Almighty is going to be capable of changing his mind. But two names stick out: Gavin Newsom, governor of California, and Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor of Michigan. How worried would President Trump be if either of those were going to be on the ticket?
I think he'd be slightly more worried, but not that much. And you've seen an interesting development in Washington and in the states, that the governors like Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, they don't want to run, because they'll lose. And maybe they won't lose to the same degree that Biden or Kamala Harris would lose, but they would probably lose. So they don't want to be the one that kills the king, first of all. And secondly, they would rather save it for 2028. because it looks right now that, I mean, in many ways, they're almost conceding the election. So I don't think that they want to run. I think it would be a mistake politically. It's very difficult to run for president or vice president and lose and then come back someday and win.
All right, so there you go. I also just saw that, I believe, I'm just going through some of the messages in the chat, and that we have Crystal Clear 17 has joined us, as well as Crepe Game. Yes, Crepe Game. So welcome. So how's it going, everybody? And then Lulu says, I knew he wasn't going anywhere. What's the point? Exactly. I mean, that's kind of my thought along with this. Is like, there were a lot of people who were like, Biden's going to go, Biden's going to go. I didn't necessarily know what was going to happen, but I was certainly like, yeah, he could go. I mean, certainly they're not going to just let this, him take down everything, I would think. And in my personal opinion, as I wrote about in the article, Trump knows that Biden isn't Biden. The Dawning of the Great Awakening, which you can find on my Substack, justindeschamps.substack.com. I think Trump knows about this. I think Biden is, as Trump says, central casting. Now, am I one of these guys that thinks that, the Patriots are literally, absolutely in control of everything, and half these people were killed and replaced by clones, or replaced with clones in Guantanamo? No, I'm not necessarily saying that, but I think there's compelling evidence to suggest that we are witnessing some type of show. If you look at the inauguration, if you want to call it that, from when Biden came in, it looked like it was taped. It wasn't even coming out live. There weren't any medals on the generals. The Admiralty Lost ceremony, which is huge. We talk a lot about symbolism. If you don't think that there's symbolism happening, then you should read some of these policy manuals for the military, the Navy, things like this. Literally, almost every aspect of the behavior that happens in their society, in their sector of the world, the military, has some ceremonial aspect. When you hear ceremony, think meaning. That action has a meaning. It's a symbol. It's a physical symbol, as an expression of a person's or of an idea that comes through the behavior, the way that they wear the clothes, the way how they walk, like the goose step, like all these different things have a symbolic meaning associated with it. And that is for a very deep reason. So basically, as far as I can tell, and I'm actually producing a series, I forgot to mention this to you guys, but I am starting a new series called Very Decoded. It's VERI Decoded. It's going to be on my Substack, so justindeschamps.substack.com, and I'm going to basically just geek out on decoding things and start to draw in some of my older knowledge about steganography, cryptology, the omniological method, or it's also called bicameral thinking in some circles. So basically, we are living in a world filled with coded messages. It's everywhere. Not only is it everywhere with respect to like TV shows and movies and comic books and things like this, but it's in the media. It's certainly, arguably, almost everything that Trump says has some kind of coded meaning associated with it. And I would argue God himself uses coded messages everywhere. That's what synchronicity is. That's why when you're studying something or you're looking up something and all of a sudden you see it, like this happens to me all the time. I'm like reading about something or studying something, and then I hear like the word that I just read on a page. All of a sudden it's like broadcast out on the video I'm watching, or I hear my wife talking about it or something like that. I'm like, what in the... Well, I think that synchronicity, or the correspondence of two seemingly disconnected events, has a symbolic or spiritual message to it. And, I'm sure you guys have had this too. As a matter of fact, I'll ask you this. When you started to have your wake-up experience, did you start to see like weird numbers, or like 1144 is one that I saw, 744 is another one, or, whatever. Maybe there weren't numbers, maybe they're words, maybe they're crosses, maybe they're flags everywhere. But when you have that happen, that's synchronicity, as they like to say, and I think it's a pretty good term for it, then I think that is some spiritual meaning associated to it. There's a kind of coded message that's happening. Now, what does it mean? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out just like you guys are, but I'm just saying, I think there's I'm guarantee you, and I'm curious, if you guys have this experience where you see these kind of coded messages, either from God or your personal spiritual path or anything like that, let me know in the chat. I'm really curious. And I also want to tell you about and promote this Very Decoded series, because I'm really excited to do it. I think something I've been passionate about for a long time. I'm going to put it out there. Lulu says, thanks, Justin. Damage has been done the past 4 years, As God reported Job's life, he will restore ours. 100%. No, I'll probably, okay, so Ninth Phase says, I love the concept, just Substack or no video stream. What I'll probably do is, very, by the way, means truth, so veritas, the prefix to veritas, the Latin word is very, so very decoded, meaning truth decoded. So I will probably, they'll be on Substack for the most part, but I'll probably start doing like I'm doing right now. Just pull up the Substack, start talking about it. It might become something more sophisticated. I mean, I have way more ambition to do content than my physical body will allow me to do, unfortunately. So if you appreciate my work and you want to support me, please go to justindeschamps.substack.com and you can support me there. Because the more support I get, the more work I can do. And I have way more ideas than I could possibly manifest in my life. But I have some really cool methods that I've been working on for years now to try to crank up the output. And it involves a content team. I also do business consulting. So one of the things I'm doing consulting for is content creators. Like, how do I help a content creator produce more content better, faster, of a higher quality so that they can have a bigger impact in the info war? Like, you know, these media minions that you see out there on CNN and NBC, they have whole teams. They've got almost billions, if not trillions of dollars dumped in their lap on a regular basis to propagandize us. And on the alternative media side, it's like the polar opposite. You got people who are barely able to scrape a living away, working almost in total isolation to try to move the needle for the info war. We have to end this nonsense. We have to work together. And I'm finally, the other day, I'm like, you know what? I do business consulting already. I need to start doing content creator consulting, where I actually work with other content creators so that we can have good quality methods, so that I can take somebody who's already doing a lot of great work and help them do even better work, and even do better work, so that, you know, the information war can proceed on at pace, and you guys as the audience can get even more fantastic content. And that's just the beginning. There's so many different things that we could do to make our current situation better if we just work together more. And I'm going to start focusing more energy on that. Hold on, let's see. The Ninth Plague says, maybe expand on your reading of the articles. Yes, exactly. That's basically what I'm doing, because admittedly, there's only so much I can fit in an article. And as you've seen in the show, it's very easy for me to go on tangents and rant. And, you know, I tend to think that that's potentially a good thing, but let me know if it's not. And then as far as Lulu says, Justin, me too, losing my part-time job, have so many ideas and looking to see how you can go forward, including a podcast. That's great, Lulu. I'd love to partner up in any way. I think, you know, not to get too much on a tangent on this, but I think there's so much talent in the alternative media, not just in the media people, but in the audience. Like, there's so many good things that come from these things we're doing. Imagine if we could capitalize on it. Imagine if we had a well-funded and well-ordered apparatus, because that's the thing. It's like, if you don't have good organization tools to take advantage of all these talents, you're not going to get a whole lot accomplished. You're just going to get a lot of pissed off, irritable people that end up usually hating each other because they didn't have good tools to work with each other. But because I'm such a geek with law and business, I actually do have a lot of great tools, and I want to start giving these tools to the world in a way that we can actually improve our lives and get to that founding father's dream. Okay, so let me move over to, there's actually another piece of this article I wanted to share with you guys. So let me close that up. So this is Trump. He's in the golf course, and to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure this is Barron Trump right next to him. He's so short. It makes me wonder if that is actually Barron Trump, because, you know, Barron Trump's like 12 feet tall. Not really. I think he's like 7 feet tall, but it's still really, really tall. And so anyway, let's play the video.
What did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, fantastic.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap. Yeah. It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race. Is that right? Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic. It's so amazing. It's just so fucking bad. So I just can't imagine. But can you imagine that guy dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man, a very tough guy. And they see him, they probably can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Really?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, right?
He is something else, man. All right, so that's Trump being Trump. He's suggested that Biden's out. I mean, I don't know where he's getting that. I mean, that's the thing, is Trump just kind of talking out of his ass because he wants to spread a certain narrative? I think, to be honest with you, I think that probably happens sometimes because he's known for his hyperbole, but he also knows a lot more than we do about these things. So one thing, I'm going to switch to this other article real quick. I'm going to get through these other ones, then we're going to spend most of the rest of the time we have on the article I put together, which is like a big one-stop shop for the replacement, Biden replacement thing, which I don't know if I actually put that in here. Hold on one second. Let me switch over to that. Here we go. Okay. And I forgot to put this one in too. All right. If you're looking at the notes right now, I'm going to update the notes here after the show because I forgot to include some things. All right. So Whitmer and Newsom don't want to run because they'll lose to Trump. And that's what that video we were just watching right here talked about. He said they don't want to run. And they're polling worse than Biden is, which again is a pretty low level of accomplishment if you think about it. That even if people with actually an ability to form a coherent sentence aren't polling better than Biden, then boy, you're in a bad spot. And that just goes to show you how utterly, corrupt and hated some of these people are, that they're polling worse than Biden. And I think that's part of the greater picture here is that, why would we go through all this? Why would Trump, if he knows Biden isn't Biden, which is my contention, and I think there's good reason to believe that, why would we be doing that? Because it's to show through an extremely exaggerated example, in my opinion, that the political system is a farce, that most of these people were never really elected to do anything, partially because is it really possible for a government that's supposed to be by, of, and for the people to actually function when most of the people don't have any idea about what's actually happening in the country? No. You've got a derelict country. It's like, can a car drive itself when nobody's at the steering wheel? Not really. What's it going to do? It's going to drive into the side of the road and hit pedestrians and cause a lot of damage. And that's kind of what our country's been doing. Except worse, it's not just driving on its own. It's been driven by these criminals who have weaponized propaganda and their knowledge of the human psyche to basically get people to do things they would under no normal circumstances actually want to do. All right, so I'm going to switch over. Where is it? So this is an interesting new poll. Americans want Ben Carson as the vice president. It's something that came out today. If you look at this, here are the poll numbers right here. There's a bunch of people who aren't sure, so this is hardly like a definitive thing. And you might be thinking like, well, what the hell does that mean? Because it's not like the vice president is elected by anybody. And no, that's not the case. But they often choose a vice president for political reasons, meaning they're trying to pick somebody that will gain the front runner clout so that they can have a greater chance to win the presidency. Now, is Trump doing that? I'm not sure. I personally think Trump will probably make his VP pick for reasons that are better for the country and likely for preparation for his legacy, meaning we're not going to get another shot with Trump unless they change the limitations on the presidency, which they could do. But anyway, as far as, presidents can only run 2 terms. That was never a provision of the Constitution. So anyway, Ben Carson looks like he's a kind of front runner. Right behind him is Marco Rubio. You got Tim Scott behind him, behind Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance. I never really liked J.D. Vance, to be honest with you, but, we'll see what happens. And who's not on the list is some of the people that we've heard a lot about, like General Flynn. Or even RFK Jr. There's some people that really like RFK Jr. for VP. I don't know enough about him to really have a whole lot of opinion. But there you go. So there's that. Let me... So here's the Trump sentencing has been delayed for 2 months if such is still necessary. So it's not even entirely clear that they're even going to sentence Trump anymore, because we're in this legal kind of weird area where there's not clear whether or not Trump, first of all, if he ever committed any crimes in the first place. I think all of you would agree that all the charges are totally trumped up, no pun intended, and there's no basis to prosecute him at all anyway. The amount of legal hula hooping these guys had to do to get these cases pushed through is absurd. So I've already ranted about that. But the judge is actually suggesting with the prosecution that it might not even be a point to sentence him at all because he's got legal immunity. So this is one of these things where it's not entirely clear, like, what's going to happen. According to the letter of the law, process is a process. The only way for a cause in law to be dealt with formally and properly is for it to be fully adjudicated. At least that's the general process consideration when it comes to law, which means that they're going to have to sentence him. And then in some other legal process, that sentencing is going to have to be commuted, overturned. I'm not exactly sure what the process would be there. So there's that. Trump, to fan the flames of Ben Carson being the VP, Trump follows Ben Carson on Truth Social. So this was from yesterday. So apparently, I don't know if they have it. Yeah, there you go. Looks like that Donald Trump follows Ben Carson. So although I'm not necessarily getting that from this image right here, but maybe I'm not smart enough to know. We have the feds on parade. So if you aren't aware of it, the Patriot Front, who is arguably the most clear-cut example of a COINTELPRO intelligence agency operation that probably exists in modern times, was marching in the streets of Nashville. Me and Ryan and my good friend Paul, American Hypnotist, went to a rally in 2020 in Georgia, and the Patriot Front was there handing out flyers. And we kind of gave them a hard time, and they didn't really have much to say. So, personally, I think these guys probably are feds, or in some way that I don't necessarily understand quite yet. Maybe even like a double agent in some way. I've heard people try to float that theory before. Like, actually, Patriot Front are in secret working for like the good guys to do something to the narrative. I don't pretend to know what the theory is on that one, but just in full disclosure, I like to share my thoughts in an omniological way. But there's a really funny video that I wanted to play with you guys. But here, before we get to that, this is some of them marching. So that is Patriot Front, guys and very fit young men that look like they're probably, I don't know, as young as 18 and as old as 35, who probably are like trainees for the FBI or something like that. I don't know if this might be Nashville, but it looks like it's somebody giving them a hard time.
The way you talked about my brother is fucking disgusting. Do not talk to me. G-Mask! 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 Take the mask off! You guys are taking the G-Mask! G-Mask! You guys are taking the streets back, are you? G-Mask! You fucking racist piece of shit! Come on, come here!
All right, so I don't really know what all the profanity's about. I think they're calling the Patriot Front people Nazis because that's part of what the Patriot Front is supposedly all about, is representing like this ultra nationalist movement, these kind of things. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that's from a previous video from a while ago. But here is the video I want to show you. It's pretty funny.
Okay, everyone. Can I have your attention, please? Quiet coyotes. I think we're all ready. We're all ready for the big event. So it's gonna be navy blue tops and khaki bottoms. If you're wearing jeans, don't bother showing up, because if we don't match, it's not gonna be scary. If I see a bunch of people wearing khakis, then it's scary. But if it's a bunch of people wearing khakis and Fred wearing jeans, they're not going to be scared. Now, the aesthetic we're going for is Ku Klux Klan, bitch, but it's at Best Buy. You feel me? So we really need to lean into that aesthetic because that's what we've committed to, Fred. Furthermore, I saw the cutest little clear serving platters. They're like big clear plates at the Dollar Tree. And I went ahead and picked a bunch of those up. and I taped a little handle on the back. So we'll all have the cutest little shields. They're not actually good for protecting anything, but they do make us look like little soldiers. It's also important that.
All right, so there you go. That's a good enough taste of it. I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so this story, this was a pretty cool one. This happened on the 4th of July. There was this town that I'm going to destroy the name pronunciation of. Where is it? Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene is a town in Idaho where the regional council told the people that they could not have political symbols. I believe it was in parades. I did a whole write-up on it. There was some confusion. Some people thought that the people were told they couldn't bring crosses, and they decided to bring them anyway. That's actually not true. The regional council head lifted the ban as a result of the response from when the ban was put in place. Nevertheless, it's still a really impressive and inspiring display, so it's not like this takes the wind out of the sails entirely. I think it's quite the reverse, actually. That's what I was getting at with the Sheriff Mack rant that I went on earlier, which is that people don't realize we have, like, arguably these nuclear-grade weapons of freedom that are sitting in our lap, and a lot of them are encoded in the Constitution or in the Declaration of Independence. Or just the foundational concepts that the Founding Fathers imbued into this country. And, there's other countries where there's like almost no hope of anything. It's just straight up tyranny. England is kind of one of those countries right now. But the United States has a lot of implicit and explicit power that the founders and our governing documents gave the people. And that's why they have to spend so much time propagandizing us, because part of the reason, everything with the cabal is multifaceted. When they use the media, whether it's radio, TV, movies, comic books in general, which is one of the oldest forms of coded or predictive programming propaganda, they use it because they're trying to infuse or incept, from that movie Inception, incept ideas and beliefs and values into people so that we actually carry out their agenda. And let's face it, they are very good at doing that. But the other reason they do this is because they need to distract us. They need people to feel alone, isolated, dumb, not able to actually think critically or properly about what's happening, and ultimately spending most of their time not learning how to defend their rights and freedoms for themselves and their community, so that we just give them the world, basically. And that's exactly what they do. But with just a little bit of motivation, people can be motivated to do something. And the way that it works is it's like a candle flame lighting up a dark room. Like, that's the way that goodness works in the world and in our country. If you think about the way a candle flame works, you go into a dark room. A candle's not a lot. It's like a single lumen of light, which is a pretty pathetic amount of light. Our lights right now, they produce like, dozens of lumens, if not hundreds of lumens. And so when you go into a dark room, it could be pitch black, and you flick on that candle flame, and it literally, it causes all the darkness to run out of the room. Well, goodness is exactly the same way. A single person has the capacity through their ideas, so the truth that they know and the wisdom that they embody, which is where I think goodness comes from. What does goodness sit on top of as a foundation? I think you need to have the truth in your mind and in your heart. And then you have to care about acting on that truth, so that when you see a child about to get kidnapped, you run over there and you stop that person. And then in the act of defending that child in a public place, let's say if you're in a mall, if you see, you're in a mall and you see what looks like somebody about to kidnap a kid, there might be 10 other human traffickers in that crowd, but they see you defending that one kid, and that prevents all of them from wanting to move forward, because most of the time criminals are cowardly people that don't want to actually confront everybody. That's why bearing arms is so powerful, because it's not that we have to murder criminals. That's not the point. Murdering anybody is arguably something that should be not done at all, except in very extreme circumstances, and we call that capital punishment using the due process of law. But a criminal will most likely not want to go after somebody who's willing to defend their rights. And that's usually what happens. In most situations, criminals are cowards. They don't want to go up against an armed person. They don't want to use the gun that they have. And there's dozens, scores, hundreds of videos, probably thousands of videos of people standing up for their rights, using their arms, whether it's an actual weapon or a knife or their fists, or just their courage, their sheer courage. And you watch the cowardly, dark, arguably demon-infested people just flee from that candle flame of light and goodness. And I think this is an example of that right here. All right, so let me flip back to this. I'm going to show you guys this video. It was really inspiring. Isn't that cool? Yeah, so there you go. So there's that. All right, and then here, I'm just going to show a little bit of this article, but before I do, I see a comment I want to show here. So here we got Rob Win 67 says, I hope VP is Robert C. O'Brien. Who is Robert C. O'Brien? I've heard this name before, and I unfortunately haven't had enough time to look into it. So I'm going to just look real quick to see if I can offer any commentary. He's an American lawyer, politician. Charles C. O'Brien Jr., born in 1966. Let me know if this is the right dude. Is an American attorney who has served 27 United States National Security Advisor from 2019 to 2021. He was the fourth and final person to hold position during the presidency of Donald Trump. Okay, well, he sounds like a good dude. Oh, wait, I think I've seen this guy talking a few times. So anyway, I don't know much about him. Thanks for cluing me in on the name. Let me go ahead and pop in a comment if you want to share anything, and I'll look at it. All right, so let me switch back over to this article here. So I wrote an article. I was inspired pre-4th of July, and it has a whole bunch of stuff in it. It's kind of one of more of my poetics type pieces that talks about some of the history, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it for you here. Let's see, where would be a good place to... I'll start from the top, and I'll read maybe 5 minutes and kind of jump around a bit. For 8 long years, we've battled against the largest and most well-funded freedom-suppressing machine in history. Long before Trump's year of capitulation, many of us in the know regarding the corruption of our world felt alone, tired, and disillusioned. In early 2015, no one could have anticipated that a new hope was on the horizon. It seemed like there was nothing to do but tread water on the rising tide of a growing technocratic deep state that continued to invade the sanctity of our lives. Little did we know that a man who truly cared about the people, our Constitution, and the freedoms promised by our founding fathers was about to enter the fray. To many of us, Donald J. Trump seemed like just another rich boy billionaire who wanted to get his piece of the pie. Others knew that he wasn't your average New York-born and raised real estate developer. Still, others knew who he really was, helping in many ways we still have yet to discover. Trump had a plan, a mission, that was going to change everything. However, he had to do the unthinkable. He had to wage a political and media war against the most wealth-developed, funded, and sophisticated intelligence agency-backed media monolith of arguably all time. This apparatus ruined lives and reputations as a matter of course. How could an audacious man like Trump stand a chance? I remember the start of the 2016 election season when Trump descended the golden escalator on June 16, 2015. The Simpsons seems to call it, which wasn't necessarily a good sign. The Simpsons also seemed to call things like 9/11. So what did this Trump prophecy mean exactly? At the time, I personally thought he was just another wealthy scumbag with presidential ambitions, hardly the first to run for the highest office in the land. Then, Trump began to secure decisive victories in the debates, and the media, in a strange yet all too familiar lockstep, began their coordinated attacks against him. I started to wonder, is this man possibly not the elite club of globalist parasites? This is actually, this is me talking, obviously, so I'm recounting what my experience of discovering who Donald Trump was in this article here. And I bring it all the way up to the current, so I'm just going to keep going here. In 2012, Ron Paul, a man of actual integrity and sense, at least in my eyes, ran to be the leader of the free world. As an aside, that title for POTUS, the leader of the free world, never made that much sense to me since the world hardly felt or feels free. It was during the 2012 election season that I first saw the propaganda machine that is the mainstream media initiate a synchronized effort to destroy then-candidate Paul's reputation, which effectively robbed him of the shot he had at the White House. It worked. And surely it would work in 2016 with Donald Trump, who was less experienced, more brash, and just a B-grade celebrity. But then, like with Ron Paul, I started thinking that Trump might not be just another globalist hack. At this point, I was well aware of the great many eyebrow-raising pieces of history, like the JFK assassination, the Tuskegee experiment, and 9/11, to cite a few examples. I also knew about the Frank Church committee hearings, where the Mockingbird media was exposed. This marriage between the media and CIA-like entities in a sordid match made in hell, in Freedom Hell, where intelligence agencies regularly molest the minds of the masses through their Weekend at Bernie's media puppets. As Trump was getting bashed by the media for the grab him by the blank Access Hollywood tapes, his small hands, and anything else they could throw at him, I remember thinking, boy, this feels like it's happened before with Ron Paul. The media was already losing credibility in their efforts to smear Trump. In my eyes, this placed him in a different category of candidate. Anyone who is attacked this badly by the media that fails to report actual corruption like the Franklin scandal or run cover for Wall Street bailouts is probably a better option than Clinton. Despite Trump's popularity as the 2016 election drew near, it seemed that yet another deep state stooge, Hillary Clinton, was about to take office and destroy America. Similar to Obama's election as the first black man to hold the presidency, people chose Clinton primarily for her novelty value. Despite her open corruption and scandals, poll after poll, she emerged as a decisive winner. At this time, by any real standard, Trump had already won every debate he had participated in, both in the primaries and against Clinton. He was already kicking ass and taking names better than anyone else before him. He made many of his Republican primary competitors seem like fools while gaining favor with a growing body of respectable people. No one but Trump could call Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig, have every mainstream media outlet on earth go after him, and still manage to gain clout with the American people and even the world. On election night, I remember the Fox News pundits with uneasiness on their faces as Trump took state after state. They couldn't believe their eyes. I knew Trump was an underdog, and that was enough. But it was when I could palpably detect the media's shock and horror, not to mention Hillary Clinton's, that I realized Trump wasn't just a surprise winner. He was something much more powerful. All right, so I'm going to skip a little further here. Let's see. So here we go. As much as Trump was able to accomplish, it was only a sliver of what could really be done if the tentacles of undue power and influence were finally dealt with once and for all. Would Trump help make this new and better world possible? Some say not, saying that despite all we've seen, he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. I have to admit that's a possibility, but only a small one in my eyes, and here's why. The globalist vision of the world requires a mindless adherence to the splendors of technology, a technocracy complete with 15-minute cities, all the problems of what we've seen over the century, more meaningless distractions, and inhuman industrialization of every area of life. The more we think critically, use our free speech, and seek to decentralize, the more we undermine the globalist vision of the future. All things that make America great again, all things that the Make America Great Again agenda fosters. Trump's actions and his intentions only seek to magnify this populist zeal for real freedom, fellowship, and at the core of it all, a meaningful life with faith at the center. The globalists, on the other hand, have to uproot faith with all its meaning, instilling power from the heart of the technocratic civilization. They have to secularize everything and remove the real freedom that God-inspired people can carve out for themselves. The globalists even dare to replace God with AI, demanding that, like God, we commune with this AI within our very bodies through cybernetic implants. For example, the line, a 15-minute city designed for the Middle East, will be built in a place where escape is not possible. Should you choose to leave, the harsh desert world will be your only refuge. It will no doubt have every future need for surveillance built in with Wi-Fi, cameras, and whatever cybernetic implants and Internet of Things the globalists have in store. These cities, in my initial review, have more in common with factory farms than places where human life and freedom can flourish. The globalists use the promise of an improved life through technology as a Trojan horse to get us to give up our freedoms. Through this covert entrapment, they drew the once decentralized and autonomous early Americans out of their faith-based and faith-centered communities into cities where working long hours to survive was a requirement. Globalists, through their puppet politicians, controlled these cities, making it nearly impossible for more patriotic, better ways of living to take root. We've seen what effect these neo-feudal dense cities have on freedom, with New York being one of the many exemplars of the dystopia the globalists have planned. Trump's vision for the future is the opposite. New cities built with freedom, faith, and merit in mind, with technology serving to free humanity from toil. One thing I want to make clear is that I believe Trump does not want to be considered some godlike savior to humanity. I believe he wants to awaken within all of us the zeal, passion, and practical industriousness he brings to the table. We all must remain vigilant and not succumb to the temptation to tune out, stop critically thinking, and assume Trump and his chosen government allies have it all figured out. The wisdom of the Founding Fathers' system of government was that it accounted for inevitable corruption, but it also planted the seeds of developing an enlightened society where every citizen willingly participates in maintaining and safeguarding the nation for the benefit of all people. In this world, we all do our part to be checks and balances, developing a culture that makes service to our fellows a joy and necessity for the increasing prosperity and wealth that naturally flow. The rule of law, the true rule of law, as I've referred to it and Trump has spoken to, is critical. This is why I believe Trump has made exposing the corrupt legal and justice systems an important feature of the operation. So I take the time to kind of like explore what some of these Agenda 47 initiatives are, which I think is really important. I probably will do a series on the Agenda 47 thing at some point. I really want to get this very decoded thing off the ground before I tackle any other major projects. But I just wanted to read this section of it. So Trump's Agenda 47, his plan for his next term in office, promises to deliver a great America in a way that few of us can appreciate. This greatness will undoubtedly also spread to other nations. As someone who has studied the causes of our civilization's decline and what it takes to have a truly prosperous future in nauseating detail, I can assure you that what Trump and the Patriots have planned will make the American dream, the dream of the ages, truly possible in a way we can barely fathom. All of the following goals are possible with Trump's Agenda 47. Freedom from endless labor. A healthy world with effective health care and non-toxic food, water, and clothing. A clean environment. A just and honest legal system and government. An end to all forms of slavery, be it debt slavery or insidious human trafficking. And an ever-stabilizing economy that will accumulate wealth and prosperity with each passing generation. These are just some of the things that will emerge from the plans for the future. The splendor of the information age, with all of its gadgets, easy-to-access products and services, and modern heating and electricity, will seem like the candy-coated, technicolored dystopia that it truly is. This will not necessarily be because of hyper-advanced technology, although I'm not ruling that out. It will be because, in my opinion, the dream of the Founding Fathers has never truly been given a chance, but it will have a full chance in the years to come. Let's just forget the technology for a moment and consider the fact that we've never had even the smallest public office in the United States or the world free of meddling, conniving, lying globalist infiltrators and intelligence agency machinations. We have never had a truly stable financial system where money isn't born out of debt and used as a covert tool of mass parasitism. We have never had a mass media that wasn't designed wholesale to be used as a weapon of psychological warfare or mind-influencing propaganda. Most of the time, globalists have used everything we enjoy today, from plastics to computers, from mechanized farming to fast distribution chains, as a tool to their advantage. It drains everyone's energy, freedom, prosperity, and creative potential while distracting us from achieving our true potential. It's as if humanity, like a delusioned Atlas with the world on his back, has been deceived into thinking the ease of today is the best it's ever been, when in reality, we've never really, as a whole people and a civilization, enjoyed even a fraction of our true potential. A thimble of real freedom and prosperity, just a tiny draft in a dwarfish cup, is what we're about to quench our freedom thirst with. It's about to swing into action in 2025, and this, my freedom-loving friends, will do more to advance our quality of life than nearly anything in the past 250 years, and that's just the beginning. Trump isn't lying when he says the best is yet to come. If our children and their children hold fast to Thomas Jefferson's injunction of eternal vigilance, this world will become a treasure beyond imagining. All right, so there you go. That's a little taste of that article. If you want to read it, I'll pop it in the chat for you guys. And I will also pop it as a comment. But you can, forget you guys, you can go to Vigilant.news, and you can get all of the things that we talk about in the show right there, and have access to all of the articles, even the Ascent Nutrition stuff that I talk about, basically everything, including these videos. So let's see what time we got. Okay, we got not doing too bad. So I'm going to flip over to this article here, which is this kind of like one-stop shop for Biden's replacement process. So this is the rules, the timeline, the contenders, and polls, all you need to know. So this article here is, I put a lot into this, and I tried to put as much sourcing as possible so you guys can do your own research. So definitely check that out. So I'm going to skip over some of the stuff that I'm sure you guys know, but, I put in some articles as to why people are calling to have him removed, like his debate performance. I got to fix that part of the article. Mental fitness, lack of outreach, although he did finally do some outreach today. He came out in a letter today, a pretty lengthy letter. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, and urged Democrats to hold fast, to not give up on him, that there's still a big fight. Which, as a comment on that, you might be thinking like, well, is this part of some ploy to get rid of Biden and bring in some other stooge because Biden's unpopular? And it could be. But I genuinely think that there's a lot of compelling evidence to suggest that Biden might actually be working for the White Hats in some way. I mean, the debate had a lot of what I think are great examples of Biden almost like hamming up his inability to answer questions and be cogent. That instead of the CNN media, trying to squash immediately, they almost like served up to Trump on a silver platter, which there might be a bunch of different reasons for why that could happen. It could be because they want Biden out, and so they want basically Trump to be Trump and destroy Biden. They know that that's the best play. So I'm not saying that the media is going along with this necessarily, but, some amount of, what does Trump say? Central casting, we're watching a movie, everything's planned, Patriots in control is going on. I don't know to what extent. I don't think it's totally controlled, because then that would mean that, in some way the Patriots are complicit with all the horrible things we've seen from the vaccine. But then again, what's the price to pay for ending the arguably millennia-long control of the world with these sadistic, pedophile, globalists? So who would replace Biden if he stepped down? Well, this is a basic list. Actually, I forgot. I did a poll. Let me see if I can pull it up, actually. I put a poll in We the Media and on my Telegram last night. Where is that thing? Ah, there it is. So let me see if I can pull this up here. Bada bing. Melissa from We the Media has been killing it. She's been doing a lot of great stuff. Let's see. Oh, that looks interesting. Where is this poll? This is all from today. Let me keep going. Okay, here it is. So here's the poll. And the poll's asked, who's going to replace Biden? And it says no one. Biden stays. Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, Gretchen Whitmer, Whitmer, I always say Witcher, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, and Josh Shapiro. I also threw in RFK because I saw some theories that some people think that he's going to, he's going to come in and save the day for the Democrats. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. But most people think that Biden's staying. And this was before a lot of the talk that we saw. At this point, we already seen a lot of the Biden staying stuff. But, not his letter today was the latest, greatest update from all of that. So, let's see. Oh, that's from the last. Okay, so hold on one second here. There it is. So we got Vice President Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, J.B. Pritzker, who's the governor of Illinois, Wes Moore, who's the governor of Maryland, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton. So those are some of the names I saw floating around out there. So who's polling the best? Well, it turns out that Kamala Harris is actually polling the best, but she isn't doing as good as Biden, as far as that's what the report said. So that's pretty interesting. So this is a cool one. What power does the DNC or other party officials have to force Biden's replacement or remove Kamala Harris as successor? How do Democratic delegate voting rules work? So this is interesting. The Democratic National Committee, DNC, has the power to replace presidential nominee if they voluntarily choose to step aside after the convention ends. The DNC rules state that the delegates elected to the National Convention pledged to a presidential candidate shall in good conscience reflect the sentiments of those who elected them. So in other words, they can't just do whatever the hell they want. Let's see. The Democratic National Committee does not have specific rules for replacing a candidate at a particular stage of the race. However, there is no clear power to remove a nominee who won't go quietly. The DNC would replace the nominee if they withdraw, but they cannot force a nominee to step down. Now, this is one theory I'll entertain for a moment. I'm sure you guys have thought of this. It doesn't seem like, based on what I've been able to research, that there's any process that they're going to use to get rid of Biden at this stage. But what could they do? Well, from a legal perspective, meaning what do the rules say, and a PR perspective, what if him and Kamala Harris had some horrible accident and they were just, unfortunately, dealt with, killed, and now it was just open season? Well, they'd get a lot of good things out of that, wouldn't they? Not again, not any censorship police that's looking at me. I'm not calling for the death of the president or the vice president or anything like that. I'm just talking about hypothetical. And that hypothetical is if Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have some sort of horrible accident. I've floated the idea that they have a plane crash because the cabal likes to kill people on planes. There's a whole bunch of people that died mysteriously on planes, like Aaliyah and a whole bunch of other people, usually musicians for some reason. But in any case, there's all sorts of ways for accidents to happen. I'll just say that. Like, just because it's hard to do it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And what that would do is it drum up a lot of sentiment. You got people who want Biden to leave, right? But if you get rid of the guy who you've said you wanted in now, it makes a lot of people look bad, and it's not exactly bringing the party together. There's a lot of dissidence inside the party right now. And although there's a significant amount of group support or unity around getting rid of Trump, I don't think that's enough at this situation, and that's at this stage. So what they could do is they could have an event where Biden, I don't know, he has some horrible accident. Him and Kamala also have a horrible accident, and they die. Then now you take all of that trauma from that sentiment, which the cabal loves using, deaths of people, and you create all this unity and sentiment around it. Simultaneously, you take all of the stuff that Trump has said about Biden and you kind of put it in cast it in this negative light, because he's kind of still has to talk negatively about Biden because he's been the avatar, the enemy that he's been fighting for his campaign. So now you kind of take the teeth out of Trump. Simultaneously, you drum up a huge amount of unity, good show of faith through the common spectacle of a tragic death. You get all these people who are kind of wishy-washy with Biden to kind of like see him as this great martyr hero, which he's not clearly, but you know, these people just realize that Biden's got problems. So unfortunately, I don't credit a lot of these Democrat supporters of Biden as being, you know, high IQ people necessarily. And so what that means is that they could, in one act or two, depending on how they pull it off, get a lot of support for whoever is going to replace that, because now the replacement has this duty to carry on the dream, the legacy of Joe Biden and everything that he fought for, and blah, 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 all the stuff that they're going to invariably heap on that narrative to make it really like buttery and juicy for people. And then simultaneously, you also get all these people feeling vindicated because they supported Joe Biden, and now that he's dead, it's like, well, you can't talk bad about a guy that he's died, especially this hero wartime president. Biden is now in the category of people like JFK or Abraham Lincoln, and you certainly can't talk bad about those people, and you certainly can't talk about Biden by extension. So it was a thought that had occurred to me. Let me know what you guys think about that. All right, so let's continue on with this article. So there's The Hill had a lot of good information on it. I'm going to just summarize it basically by saying that they don't really have a lot of power to get rid of Biden unless he steps down or unless Kamala Harris steps down. So they have to go on what they've originally agreed to do, which they've originally agreed to basically represent Biden. They could have what's called a mini primary. They could potentially vote for somebody other than Kamala Harris. So they could get rid of Biden, and they could also vote to get out Kamala Harris. I'm not discounting that possibility, but I'm not sure if that's what will happen. My personal theory at this point, and I'm obviously subject to change, is that I think they've got something more dramatic in store, like I was just talking about. They're not forced to vote for Kamala Harris. What are the rules for the election ballot in general? Well, this one's tricky. So the other benefit to getting rid of Biden in a dramatic way is that you force the ballot change situation to happen. In that one fell swoop, you also get the Heritage Foundation and all the work that they're going to do to prevent Biden from getting taken off the ballot. You know, you kind of take the teeth out of their effort as well. So, you know, this idea of a tragic accident for Biden, I think it checks a lot of boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction, which isn't necessarily a good idea, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. All right, so as I mentioned, the Trump people don't necessarily want to go against Biden, and they don't want to run. What power do donors have to replace Biden? What rules prohibit them from removing him using their powers of possession? So they actually don't have a lot of power, the delegates. I mean, they can do stuff behind the scenes, and that's kind of what we've been hearing about. But they don't have a lot of authority or power to do anything officially. But don't think that they're not going to try in a lot of ways and line up a lot of back-end deals. And personally, my thought is behind all of this is if the official narrative is that Biden isn't actually, you know, a white hat, or actually it doesn't matter. If he is a white hat, they're still going to want to get rid of him, the cabal. And if he is a white hat, then they still want to get rid of him. So I think they're going to try to do is they wanted this situation to happen, like I'd argue in the Panic in DC article that's on my Substack, justindeschamps.substack.com, to create basically a trauma-based mind control event, so that the people at various levels of the pie, like, so you got your average CNN, you know, MSNBC watchers, your rank and file Democrats, they are calling to replace Biden. Then you got people all the way up the chain, big-time mega donors who at some level are the middle manager mercenaries of society, who the cabal reared up from, you know, various positions of power, which they're very good at doing that, using their power of the financial system and the seedy corruption that it has with the federal government and the legislature and things like this, private contract. So I think all of this is in some way forcing them to demand Biden go out. And in doing so, if they do decide to get rid of Biden in a dramatic way, then these middle tier people, these donors and anyone else who's at the DNC level, let's say, they are likely going to position and argue for removing him and putting somebody else in position. And they're going to want people to justify that horrible act. And I think this is part of what we're seeing right now, if I'm right, which is that they're going to use the debate thing, which they, in my opinion, the DNC and the globalists, they wanted the debate to go horribly because they're trying to get Biden out and put somebody else in. So they have the Next Generation PAC, which is their pledge to basically create a new political action committee that will raise $100 million to support whoever replaces Biden. And it will do all these various things. You can read about that. It's also, this is a question I had. Is it possible to transfer the Biden-Harris campaign war chest to another candidate? If so, what rules govern the use and reshifting of campaign funds in the Democratic Party's 2024 race? So they can't just turn it over. So this is something interesting. Transfer to another candidate. In the event that President Joe Biden were to resign and Vice President Kamala Harris did not emerge as the nominee, the former campaign would be limited to transferring $2,000 of funds it had accumulated to a new candidate. I mean, another question I have is, well, where the hell does all that money go? Do they just like donate it to the Boy Scouts, or is it just like disappear quietly behind the scenes somewhere? I'm sure it's the latter. Then another thing here, conversion to a political action committee. So they could potentially create a political action committee with the funds somehow in the war chest wrapped around it. I'm not exactly sure how, but this is part of what my research uncovered. The person, as a result of that political action committee, could potentially access those funds if they follow the right process. So that's basically it. There's a bunch of other stuff in this article, so I'd suggest, if you can't, like I said, if you want like a one-stop shop for the replacement process for Biden, then I suggest you take a look at that article. All right, then lastly, I want to show you guys a couple videos. So this is a cool video I found. Wall Street Apes had played it. I got a lot of views, at least for me anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and play it, and we'll take a listen.
I think Trump is the most...
Oh, hold on a second.
I think Trump is the...
Oh, all right. I don't know what's going on here. Hold on a second, guys. Let's see if I can... it this way, maybe.
I think Trump is the...
All right, I guess not. Through social. It gets a little glitchy. All right, I'm just going to play it as best as I can in this format. So here we go.
I think Trump is the most aggressive and competent opponent that the Franklin Roosevelt coalition has ever faced. They've run the country now since 1932. They built huge bureaucracies, huge sets of rules. They've paid off millions of people with taxpayer money. And all of a sudden, they have an opponent who's very serious about dismantling and replacing their corrupt system. They're terrified of him. And from their standpoint, breaking the law, rigging the game, whatever it takes, they're going to do to try to beat him at every level. The trial in New York is just one example. It's totally dishonest. I actually think that the judge in the New York trial and the students illegally occupying the building in Columbia University are really the same people. They're people who believe in breaking the law to impose their will on the United States. And I think that you're seeing a trial which is probably the most dishonest, most corrupt trial of any political figure in American history.
All right, so there you go. You know, I who's to say what's happening? There's, in the sense that I've heard Matt Ehret talk about the fact that maybe Franklin Delano Roosevelt wasn't actually the kind of leftist wet dream that we've heard him to be. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Again, this is where it comes down to history. Like, history is so convoluted and messed up. Who's to know what is real for sure? But that's why I, as I talked about many times, we have to use the omniological method to really dig into, like, well, what is going on here? We got Ginlane says the Biden estates need to be sued and fined for their evil deeds. 100% agree. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of suing, I imagine, that happens at some point here once all this goes down. By the way, guys, if you haven't already liked this episode on Rumble or wherever you're watching it, please do so. And also please share it on your social media platforms. I'd greatly appreciate it. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the Tennessee geoban bill, geoengineering ban. So that I believe it was in April of this year, Tennessee actually banned geoengineering, which is remarkable. So we're going to play this little clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Dr. Denise Sibley. I'm an internal medicine physician from Johnson City, Tennessee. I've been treating patients for 35 years. I support this bill, and I refer to it as the Atmospheric Protection Act. Several states besides our own, including New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Kentucky, Connecticut, Iowa, and South Dakota, are involved in actions to protect their atmosphere as well. Cloud seeding has been recognized since 1965 in Maryland and 1967 in Pennsylvania, both in our own TCA 58-2-116, which specifically mentions legal weather modification in our state, and in the 44-page White House June 2023 congressionally mandated report regarding the framework for governmental past, present, and future weather modification through solar radiation modification using stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, and cirrus cloud thinning. There's no doubt that weather modification is taking place within our state. These actions of intentional manipulation of the atmosphere produce pollution and unintentional consequences that affect the health of our citizens, the safety of our water supply, our soil viability and crop production, the ecosystem survival, the precipitation extremes with flooding and drought, climate variability and extremes, and disruption of the economy. The spraying of sulfur dioxide is identified as causing acid rain, known to be detrimental to the health of humans, causing respiratory diseases such as asthma and worsening lung disease, as well as acidifying the water supply and soil. In addition, heavy metals have been detected in rainwater samples in Tennessee from 2017 from Clarksville, Tennessee, that contain dangerous substances such as strontium, barium, aluminum, and sulfur. And we are in the process of obtaining new water samples in our area in East Tennessee as well.
All right. So, wow. When I saw this, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I cannot believe I missed this. But basically, as you saw, there's is an open acknowledgement of chemtrails. There we go. Sometimes I lose my place on these things. Okay. It's an open acknowledgement of chemtrails, and supposedly this is, who knows if this is true, but the skies, oh no, this isn't the post I was looking for. There was another post I saw of, oh, here we go. Funny, on July 2nd, one day after the Tennessee weather modification ban took effect, I got this pic at the park of a trail magically starting as the flight crossed over the state from Tennessee to Virginia. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if we just take it on its face value, it's most likely has some truth. I'm sure all of you have seen chemtrails to a staggering degree in your time on this planet. It's hard to miss them, although acknowledging them as such is not necessarily something that is popular or is done frequently, but it's really inspiring to know that this is actually happening. I can't tell you how many arguments I've gotten into people. I was definitely somebody who really beat the drum on this subject when my early years of awakening in like 2010, 2011, 2012. And I cannot tell you how much, I was genuinely shocked by how many people just flat out refused to even consider the idea when I was talking about this to my friends and family and other people I worked with and whatnot. But call me stupid. I was the gullible one who thought that I had the evidence, I could show it to them, and they would actually be open to the truth. And boy, those are some informative years for my my quest to try to make the world a better place back then. And it's kind of what led me to do what I'm doing now, because I realized that I could not take a direct path to just sharing the truth directly with people. We had to, I have to speak to people who are actually interested in the truth, where there's not many, and then form alliances with those people, which is you guys, and then we work together as a team to create like a strong foundation, a strong inner circle, to use that term, so that we can have a more cohesive, strong unit. And that's basically what Trump decided to do, you know, and look how much success the Trump operation has had to wake people up. I mean, so many more people are hip to the things that, you know, I'm sure you guys all know about, just like myself. So anyway, so the chemtrails thing is amazing. I'm so glad that this happened. Crepe Game says, so glad to see Tennessee has this bill to shut down chemtrails. Millions of people still don't believe this is happening to all of us. I completely agree. It's pretty shocking. And I also wanted to mention that, you know, she mentioned that there's heavy metals, strontium, cadmium, aluminum. There's toxins floating down from the atmosphere that cause massive health issues. And it's very difficult to remove these heavy metals from your body. It is not just simply as easy as like, oh, I'm going to stop, you know, going to the beach and everything's fine. It's like, no. Now, thankfully, God is God, and our body is beautifully and so amazingly equipped with the tools it needs to detox, but there's a process you got to follow. And that process involves eating properly. So you got to cut out the sugar and the garbage because that slows down the body's natural systems of removing the toxins. And then you got to eat foods that help you remove these toxins. And what's interesting, there's a man named Augustus Vanderplanets, which is a pretty crazy name, but as far as I can tell, some of his stuff is pretty spot on. I've known a couple people who used his methods, and it's worked. And one of the things he suggests doing is eating raw cheese. Now, fat in particular, this is scientifically known, fats will actually absorb toxins. And they already know this, that your fat often contains a lot of toxins. What they don't tell you is that that's also true for the food you eat. And one of the reasons you want to eat food with a plenty amount of fats in it is because they'll actually suck out the toxic crap out of the food you eat. But in order to do that, you got to have the right kind of fats. They can't be like this homogenized seed oil garbage, which is everywhere. Seed oils actually are toxic for you, as many people know. And if you haven't started taking seed oils out of your diet, I strongly suggest. They lead to mental decline, poor aging, synaptic issues, meaning that your brain cells don't fire properly, all sorts of stuff. One of the things you can do is take what Ascent Nutrition has. And I say this with all seriousness because I've known people who have taken these things, humic and fulvic acid. There's actually a testimonial that we got from a lady who, I'm sure you guys remember, during the vaccine situation, there were people saying that the magnets were sticking to their body. And that's what this lady was talking about. She said she had gotten the vax, I believe it was twice, and at the injection sites, the magnets were literally sticking to her body. And so I saw videos of this. I've known one person who personally testified to this. I did not get the vax, so I don't know if that's true, but I put it in the highly likely category of being true. And this gal, she started taking the humic and fulvic acid, which again can help remove heavy metals, aluminum, all sorts of things. And ours in particular is nano size, so it's a much smaller than a lot of the humic and fulvic acid products you might find out there. So it can actually get into the cell to help remove stuff out of the cell. And that's really difficult to do. A lot of garbage gets into the cell that's almost impossible to get out once it's in there. Also, she started taking this stuff, and within a single bottle's worth, so a month, 30-day cycle, she said that the magnets no longer stuck to her body. Now, but she had something else to say. She said she had chronic arthritis and joint pain. She also had severe psoriasis, so the scaly skin thing that I'm sure you guys have heard about. It kind of looks like dry skin, but it's not actually dry skin. What it is, it's an autoimmune condition where your body literally grows more cells because it's under some kind of attack. So it's kind of like your body's healing system is broken and it produces more cells thinking that there's something going on when there's not. So anyway, she had really bad psoriasis. This is what the testimonial said. And her psoriasis literally would peel off and it did not come back after the month treatment. And her arthritis and joint pain went away. Now, this is a testimonial, so in full honesty, I don't know if that's true. But I've heard enough people say good things about this stuff that I think it works. I personally take it. I think it works. And my wife takes it, and she's very sensitive to toxins, and she thinks it works too. So I strongly suggest you guys grab yourself a bottle of humic and fulvic acid. It's pretty inexpensive too. It's really high quality. We make it basically organic, although you can't label humic and fulvic acid organics. That's the only reason it's not says organic, but it essentially, it's effectively organic. And it's some of the highest quality out there. As far as some of them have like toxins straight up in them, which is like, what the hell's the point in putting out a product like that if it's going to have toxins in it? But ours does not. So don't forget, you can use promo code FREEDOM and get a special discount as well. And it's also 10% off for life, or for the life of the subscription you have. If you get a subscription, it's also free shipping as well. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for watching and supporting us. If you haven't liked or subscribed to the show yet, please do so. Also, share the show with your friends, put it on your social media, cut clips from it, do it anything you want. If you guys want to know, is a little tip or trick about how to get cool clips that you can share on social media. You can open up a free Substack account. You can download the video using any video downloader. Just search for download Rumble video. You'll find a website that'll help you do it. Once you get the video file, you can upload that as a podcast or a video file to Substack. And once it's done processing, it will actually make clips for you that you can actually apply the little closed captions to automatically. It's amazing. Like, there was a service I was going to pay for that. It was going to be like, it was something obscene. It was like $200 a month for 1,000 minutes, which, you know, I do enough shows where I could chew through 1,000 minutes, like no problem. And you can actually do it all for free now, almost automatically, using Substack. So I don't know who's running Substack, but you're killing it because they make an incredible platform. Definitely subscribe to my Substack, justindeschamps.substack.com. I'm going to be putting out that series, Very Decoded, here. Probably the first one will come out this week. First up on the Decoded platter is Dave Chappelle. I found some really interesting things that he said in his monologues that I think you're going to want to look at, because I think it has steganographic or coded language import. And I think he's actually doing a lot of good, Dave Chappelle, with some of the stuff he's doing. So, and there'll be a lot more coming out in that series in the future. So with that, much love, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time on Vigilant News.